All right, let's get right into it. There's this idea, and it's getting really popular, especially in places like Silicon Valley. It goes something like this. Our democracies, they're slow, they're messy, they're just broken. So what's the fix? Well, why not fire the politicians and hire a CEO to run the country like a company? A CEO king, if you will.
And that's really the big question we're tackling here. What if we did that? It's a pretty radical, post-democratic thought. It's asking us to imagine a government that values pure efficiency and long-term vision over, the messy business of elections. But is this a genius solution, or is it a really dangerous idea?
Okay, before we can even talk about the solution, we have to be honest about the problem. And let's be real, the frustration people feel with modern democracy, it's not coming from nowhere. The critique is based on actual, observable problems that I'm sure you've seen too.
And the diagnosis is pretty sharp, right? Democratic systems, they're almost designed to reward short-term thinking, anything to win that next election. That leads to pandering, to fiscal irresponsibility, special interests get a huge say, and the really big long-term stuff like national debt or climate change, it feels like we're just spinning our wheels. The whole system just feels stuck.
So with all that in mind, you can see why this radical alternative starts to sound pretty tempting. What if we could just wipe the slate clean? What if we built a new system from the ground up, one designed for pure, unadulterated efficiency, run like the most successful startup in the world?
Well, this idea actually has a name. It's called neocameralism. It's been popularized by thinkers like Curtis Yarvin, and the basic idea is to think of the state as a giant corporation. The leader is a sovereign CEO. They're not accountable to voters, but to shareholders. The government is just professional management, and we, the citizens, are treated like customers. And in theory, if you don't like the service, you can take your business elsewhere.
And this quote right here, it's the real turning point for this entire conversation. Because the argument for the CEO king, it isn't stupid, not at all. The people who make it see the problems with democracy very clearly. But they're only seeing half the picture. And the half they're missing, that's where all the danger is hiding.
This brings us to the absolute core problem with the whole CEO king argument. There's a fundamental, deeply flawed mistake in how it compares the two systems. It's what you might call a dangerously asymmetric comparison.
So here's the flaw, laid out plain and simple. The critics are judging democracy based on all its messy, complicated, real-world failures, all the stuff we see and complain about every single day. But they're judging the alternative, the CEO-led autocracy, based on its theoretical, perfect, imagined advantages, the idealized version that only exists in their heads.
I mean, it's a totally unfair fight, isn't it? It's like comparing a real 20-year marriage with all of its history, its compromises, its flaws, to a perfectly curated online dating profile that promises you the world. One is reality, the other is just an advertisement.
Okay, so what happens when we level the playing field? What if we apply that same tough, real-world scrutiny to the CEO king model? Let's take a hard look at how these systems with concentrated power actually fail in the real world. And trust me, the failures are catastrophic.
First up, the single biggest problem. How do you hand off power? For all their flaws, elections solve this peacefully. Autocracies, historically, are terrible at this. The death or removal of one all-powerful leader almost always creates a power vacuum, and that can lead to a violent succession crisis or even a full-blown civil war. It is the system's most reliable and deadly flaw.
Second, and this is huge, a ruler who can't be challenged can't be corrected. Think about it. When you punish anyone who brings you bad news, you destroy your own warning system. The CEO king only hears what they want to hear, right up until the moment the whole system implodes because they missed some giant fatal flaw that everyone was too scared to tell them about.
And third, let's talk about corruption. The idea is that getting rid of elections and a free press will make things cleaner. No way. It does the exact opposite. It supercharges corruption. When there's no one to hold you accountable, the incentive isn't to create value for your customers. It's to take as much as you can for yourself and your friends.
And look, this is not just a theory. This has happened. During the Great Leap Forward in China, local officials were terrified to report crop failures, so they lied. They passed fake positive data all the way up the chain of command, right to the top. The result was the deadliest famine in human history. 45 million people. That's the real-world cost of an information bottleneck.
So this brings us to what might be the single most important takeaway from all of this.
The real choice isn't between a broken system and a perfect one. It's about what kind of failures you're willing to live with. Democracy, with its distributed power, is like a system with lots of small, frequent, but manageable leaks. Autocracy, with its concentrated power, might look fine for a while, until the whole thing bursts, catastrophically.
So if the CEO king is just a burst dam waiting to happen, what do? Well, the answer isn't to tear down all the constraints on power that make democracy feel so messy. The answer is to get serious about redesigning and strengthening those constraints for the world we live in today. And that requires a fundamental shift in how we think about this. We're obsessed with finding the perfect leader, the brilliant, enlightened ruler who will fix everything. But that's a trap. The real goal, the much harder and more important goal, is to build a system so robust, so well-designed that it can survive a bad ruler, or even a dumb one. And this isn't just some vague hope. There are actual concrete principles we can follow. 1. Push power down to the most local level possible. That's where the best information is. 2. Let states and regions compete and experiment with different policies, like laboratories of democracy. And 3. Build tough, constitutional limits on executive power that can't be easily chipped away over time. This quote just sums it all up perfectly. A system that can act with incredible speed and efficiency to solve a problem is also a system that can act with incredible speed to take away your freedom. So we have to ask ourselves, what would we rather deal with? A leaky faucet we have to keep patching up, or a burst dam that floods the entire house?
And that really leaves us here. We've been asking the wrong question all along. The most important question isn't who is the best person to rule. The truly essential question, the one that everything depends on for a free and prosperous society, is this: how do we build a system that ensures our rulers can always be constrained, corrected, and when necessary, replaced, all without the whole thing collapsing into chaos?